Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we will talk about variables. Remember last time we talked about the statements and we said that one of the important statements is the assignment statement. So let's review the assignment statement. I will create first a new folder and I will create a new Python file inside it. So the new folder I'm going to call variables, because today we're talking about variables too. And inside it, I'm going to have a file and I will call it script.py. So in here, I'm going to talk a little bit about the assignment and the assignment statement, and we will start talking about variables. So the assignment statement is one of the important statements in a program in Python, because basically this is how we instruct the computer to create a variable in memory. So let's start with this assignment statement. When you say A assigned 3, for example, as I mentioned before, this is an instruction to create or to allocate, say to allocate memory and give it a name. The name of it, or the identifier, is X. X is the identifier or the name, and it has a value 3 and a type int or integer, because A has 3. 3 is an integer, that's why. And because it's an integer variable, the size of it is 4 bytes. So 4 bytes. Okay, so it's a piece of memory, allocated piece of memory. The size of it is 4 bytes because it's an integer. This is a type, and it has the name A. So whenever I mention the name A in an expression, the value of A is grabbed in this expression. For example, if I want to use the print function, it goes like this, and it can take an argument. So if the argument is A, then the value of A will be printed. So if I run this, you will see here that the value is 3. Okay, so the value of A. So this is what we call the assignment statement, this one, right? And this is a function call. We're going to talk about functions later. Now, for the assignment statement, we have what we call an identifier or a name for the variable that we have. So the variable can be of several types. Some of them are primitive, like they come with the language. Like what? Like, we want to write here in a comment, integer, float, string, and Boolean. All these are coming with the language. Like, they are not really user-defined. Like, you can just use them once you start Python. However, later on, when we cover classes, we can see that we can create our own variables or our own types of variables. So we can, for example, have a variable of type car, a variable of type student, a variable of type fruit, something like that, right? So variables go like this. We have a variable name like A or B or C, let's say B, and then we have the assignment operator. It's not the equality operator, the assignment operator. And after that, we have the value. And the value can be, as I said, float or integer like this, or we can have something like true. This is called Boolean. And Boolean can be true or false. It can be one of two values, true or false. We are going to use this later. And we have something like a string, like hello. And a string, basically, it's a text, just a text. I'm going to write here, string or a text, right? So these are all assignment statements for different types of variables. Am I allowed to choose any name for a variable? In general, yes, but we have to follow some rules. So one of the rules, for example, is to use alphanumeric characters for a variable name. Like we can mix letters, English letters, and numbers. Like we can say something like ABC1. This can be a variable name. Okay, so ABC1, and we can have the value 5 inside it, right? Also, we can have an underscore. So we can say, for example, student GPA, and we can have 3.4. We cannot have any other types of characters. So letters, digits, and underscores. Letters, digits, and underscores. We can start with an underscore. However, we should not, because it has a different meaning. But we can have something like var, something like that, and then we can have this take the value 300. Okay. So we can do that. We cannot start with a digit. So we cannot say, for example, 5 result. It's not allowed. So the rules are, we can use alphanumeric characters like the English letters and digits. We can use underscore. We can start with underscore, however, we should not. And we cannot start with digits. These are the rules. Now, there are some conventions, like people used to have the names in a way, like we need to follow these this way to have a representative variable name, or a variable name that is meaningful, representing the data. And if this variable name consists of 2 words or more than 1 word, you separate them by an underscore. For example, if you want to have a variable name for the student GPA, so you write student underscore GPA, something like that. If you want to have something like today's temperature, so you can say something like today and then temp 24. If you want to have the value of the Canadian currency, so you can say CAD underscore currency, and then you write the value, which can be something like 1.34, something like that, right? So how to name a variable? Again, as I mentioned, to summarize, letters and digits, underscore. We cannot start with a digit. Use an informative name or meaningful name. This is how we use a variable. And here I'm going to show you how we print them. So to print, we can use the variable name. As I mentioned, whenever we have the variable name in an expression, that means the value is being called or being grabbed. So for example, I can print here ABC1. I can print CAD currency. I can print in single line, or I can print in single line today's temperature and student GPA, something like that, right? So we created variables, as you can see, a variable of type integer, a variable of type float. Float here means decimal. A variable of type true, a variable of type boolean, a variable of type string or text. And then we showed how to name the variables. And let's print also the ones here, which are D, which is hello, and print C as well, which is true. So if we run this, you'll see here, this is the first variable of type int or integer, the second variable of type integer as well, which is the Canadian, which is ABC1, and then the Canadian currency, that's a float, 1.34, and then we have 2 variables, one of type integer, this one, and the other one of type float here, and then we have hello as a text or a string, and then true. So this is how we create variables in Python, as easy as that. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I'll see you next time to show you how we use variables in expressions.